All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Approval of the minutes for our regular meeting of September 11th.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And one abstention. So, 4 in favor, 1 abstention.
I don't know if we're supposed to have this on. It actually looks more like a moon there, which is interesting because Ojai means maybe moon or nest,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Could be a sun or a moon.
Yeah. I wonder,
The sun, I like the one on number 5 because the other ones sort of compete with Chief's Peak.
Is not having the feather. It seems a little cleaner and crisper.
Yeah, I like the idea of the feather, but when it's actually there, it seems like it competes for.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
does anyone have a copy of the other logo that we had looked at? I forgot to. I'm just wondering, I like number 2, I can agree to everything. I just wonder if maybe the brown is what's keeping us from really loving it, and if that could be more like the blue.
So it's actually gray. It just, our printer, but if we were to print this, it's actually more, and you can see it on number 6, it's that gray, or
Oh,
it should
yeah.
be that gray.
Okay. Do you know what I mean by adding color to the field that the Ojai Unified is on?
Sure.
Otherwise, 2 could work really well. I think that the original one with the tower, or the post office tower, had a lot of blue, really
Mhm.
strong blues and golds. Might, but I don't know that, then you lose the river, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm fine with,
What if it was green? And we could pretend like we have a green valley.
We tried the green and
You're right, and
there
we
wasn't
didn't
a way
like
to
it.
keep the river. So you
Yeah.
lost the river, or the river had to turn white, and then you couldn't tell what it was, and so.
Okay.
It could be a river or a snake. So I'm hearing that number 2 is pretty popular generally,
That's the one I'm drawn to.
but there were comments about the sun/moon. Or are we good with that? Or do we want a simple one with more blue in the sky?
well, it's, when I'm looking at number 5, obviously there's a lot fewer sun rays, which I kind of prefer. But I like the mountains in number 2. I think everyone kind of agrees on that, the mountains in number 2.
You can definitely take out at least 2 rays, one on each side, and just move them up, and it'll be a little more.
Do you like the shape of the rays in 5 better, or is it just a number?
I think it's just that they're not as long. Sorry, it seems like the chief peak is a little higher on the whole.
It is.
But then that gives you more of the brown that you were
Yeah,
trying to avoid,
That's true.
or gray.
Yeah, I really don't like the gray. I don't know what else would be in there.
Black.
What if the background for Ojai Unified is, well, I guess you're trying to do the pink moment there, huh? Because I said it could be that color, and the mountain could be more something else, but.
No problem.
Okay.
I'm very ill qualified to have.
That's what I was just thinking about myself, Thane, not about you, but we need an artist to come and tell us what works, or a PR graphic. That's who did this, huh? Uh-huh. Okay, got it.
Well,
Does he have a preference?
It sounds like we're really close on number 2, but sun from number 5. Is that?
Or some version of it. It's actually the same sun, because I actually made number 5. It's the same sun, it's just because the mountain was
Moved up.
moved up, they're
Mhm.
shorter. And then there's actually some hand coloring on the pink edges, is like some hand coloring, which is a layer we can take off easily. So we can make the sun slightly less pink on the tips, and then maybe remove a couple of rays.
Yeah, that might work.
Yeah.
It's just the bottom 2 on number 2, they're really thick rays as well, so
Yep.
maybe that's it.
But
But
rays
anybody
would-
else think about that moon idea?
I kind of like the moon idea, but I personally, I'd rather have more blue sky and tone down the yellows.
Mm-hmm.
I like it in theory, but I like the dynamicness of the sun rays. It loses movement somehow in the
Plus,
moon
we don't have
version.
school at night.
This is a true fact. We could.
So from a process perspective,
We're asking about like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
what's
asking
printed.
about
The sign in the boardroom.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point it would go on the vehicle.
I do too, maybe just smaller though. Maybe it's just too big.
And I don't think there was controversy about the feather. I think people liked the feather. I think it was just people thought there might be controversy, and in our talking about it, it was mostly everybody was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm fine with it. It's just, yeah, I don't want it to compete too much. And on
It
two,
looks
with
smaller in
everything
number
moved
5.
down,
Mhm.
there's even less room for it.
Mhm.
But I'm, you know, I'm totally fine with the thing.
That's true.
Maybe if
So-
it were a little smaller.
Mhm.
Maybe it could be the I in Ojai.
Yeah.
No, you don't want me part of the conversation.
Is there a way to make a decision without having to come back again on this?
I think so.
Board?
I mean, because we continue to have more ideas which are gonna require design
More
work.
iterations.
Yeah.
All right,
Unless we kind of say, yes, we know, we like the sun, smaller feather, oh, high white. I mean, if you tell me what you want as the non-negotiables, then we can move forward and say,
And here's what you
yes,
Frankenstein.
yes.
yeah,
Sounds fine to me.
Okay.
all right, we're good with that?
Okay.
All right, then let's move forward with the first reading of the CSBA recommended board policies. So, it's been a while since I've read through this. I think my first comment was on page 9. Is there anything before that? And 9 was just that section was an optional policy. And I wondered if anybody really wanted that, or,
I think we already have them, actually, the protocols and the, so if, I'm
so
afraid.
we could leave it as is? Or do you want to take this?
I mean, they're not, I mean, I think the only new thing is regarding ballot measures, and it seemed okay to me, and I don't want to say, no, we don't want to have communication with the public in our board.
You last
Sure.
approved this October 2018.
Okay, so a year ago, we approved this section.
And I have no objection with it.
Okay. 14, if there's nothing before that, same thing. But it's an optional policy.
I think this is useful on page 14 about gifts, grants, and requests. We do get these, and we do refer to this.
Okay.
And so they're already in place, right? So just, the wording is,
Tiffany, you may need to pull your mic down.
so the wording on, the only one that's new is 4,
And 5.
5, and 3. 3 seems like
An obvious.
an obvious
I'm just
one.
wondering if, seemed like we used to have a Coke or a Pepsi clock in the gym.
Mhm.
So would we have to remove that?
I'm not sure. You can look into that.
And what if Coke or Pepsi decided they wanted to?
I'm okay with
Donate.
4 not being necessarily added. 3 makes sense to me. 5 makes sense to me as new policies.
You know, if we're committed to farm to table, if we're committed to from scratch meals, if we're committed to all those things, I mean, don't get me wrong, I am actually a Coke addict. But having the machine right next to the vegetables, I just, you know, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways we can get sponsorship, but I think we also need to be sensitive to the messages it's sending.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Well, also, is this optional?
Yes.
How do we know it's optional?
Well, the first little box says the whole thing is optional.
Oh, okay.
So do we want to keep it with taking away number 4? No, we want number 4, because we really don't want that. We just have to be careful, look around and
So
take down something.
is there a difference between advertising and endorsing?
It says advertise or endorse.
No, I
So
mean,
could you take
since
out
we
one
could
or the
tailor
other?
this, I mean,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, so advertising would mean you could have your clock. Endorsing means we're saying
saying
everyone should
drink
drink
Coke.
Coca-Cola.
Right.
Right.
Because we could use the support. Right? I mean, I don't want to turn away potential support either.
Right, because, I mean, we have all those signs on the track that are supporting, you know, local businesses.
Right.
I mean, which is, again, not, this is non-nutritious food or beverages, but,
I mean, I agree verses 3 and 4, I wouldn't want to have Jewel sponsor a clock, but I wouldn't, I don't drink Coke or Pepsi, but I wouldn't mind having them sponsor a clock.
Right.
I
so
guess.
shall we just take out the word
Mind
advertise?
having them.
would.
I'm not so thrilled with Coke or Pepsi being advertised in the schools personally.
So then if we get to pizza,
If we get pizza,
I mean,
Like
so if we get down
Domino's.
to pizza and we had
is
a
that an
local,
advertisement?
right, and they wanted to have a sponsorship in the gym or something like that. This one to me is,
Or we have banners on the football field.
So
Right.
what you're suggesting is take it as each incident comes along rather than a blanket policy.
so I like the suggestion of endorsing the use, because
Right,
I
that's
think
the
if you
part that
take
I
out
would take right?
advertise,
Because that implies we're putting a seal of approval on things, and
right,
I don't know that, I think that's maybe a step too far, right? Just because we're allowing someone to advertise doesn't necessarily mean that we're
Right.
endorsing it as a district. And
So it would
that
read-
kind of activity, I think, would be questionable.
Ensure that the board does not accept a gift that endorses the use of non-nutritional, for number 4.
and it's during the school day, right? So theoretically, so then you get into the football stadium is used during the day, or the basketball gym is used during the day. I mean, this particular one to me doesn't seem very well written, but we pulled them from Gamut, and so, or from CSBA.
Right. Yeah, so then who decides what endorse means?
Right.
You know,
I mean, you could say advertise or endorse the use of non-nutrition during the school day without the approval of the prior approval of the school board, and we can bring those to you.
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
That would, yeah. Good job.
I would prefer nothing to come, no, like that, but that's right. Anything,
All right, and then when any gift of money is received by the district is not immediately used, it shall be placed in the county treasury. Does that mean for our use later or to turn over to the county?
If you read the above box, you'll see it's sort of specific to the opportunity to earn interest in it. If it's for some particular purpose, you keep it segregated in a particular account.
Okay,
So it's not, but I actually have an issue with the one before that. All gifts, grants, and bequests shall become district property. I think our donors know what they want to donate to, and if and when they want to donate to something specific. I don't see any reason why we should be imposing this on anybody.
I mean, OEF has done a lot of specific, well, the grants are all specific.
I think it's just a reminder, Kevin, because I know you know, let's say, like, for instance, they donate to a particular classroom and then that teacher retires, or the teacher moves to the middle school, and does the teacher take them with, and then does somebody say, well, no, I wanted them to stay at that elementary school? So it just provides the district the opportunity of not being behest,
Beholden.
yeah, beholden to a particular, I mean, I think it's okay to accept it for that classroom or that library, but if the librarian leaves, or if, I just think there's so much movement in our district right now that we do run the risk. I mean, I've even heard a little bit of rumblings this year about certain things, and I think if you just have that statement, that the understanding of, we accept it for that classroom for that year, but the future of that classroom or that teacher or that library is,
And then what happens to the gift if the classroom or
Right.
the teacher is
so
not there?
I think you really don't want people to have, I mean, that's the whole point. By accepting any gift, grant, or bequest, the board shall carefully consider any conditions or restrictions. That's the very first part. And I think you get into risky territory if you try to let them restrict too much. I don't have a problem with it.
Well, like so many of these policies, I just worry when we start getting into, like the last part, that it becomes the superintendent's discretion to accept certain gifts for particular schools. Is that going to be a policy we actually follow? Is it going to, are we going to have a policy that we have to vet every gift that would otherwise have gone to a specific classroom or a school? And then how will that process occur? Or is it going to be kind of just kind of a sort of kind of policy? I guess that's, I worry that if it becomes a really formal policy that you're going to turn some people off. I agree with you, Jane, but I think what you said is basically just a reality of whenever you give something to a school, you can't expect that it's going to be for perpetuity, in that classroom or wherever. I don't feel like we have to tell people that.
Do you think we should not have this policy since it's optional?
Maybe, if we're not gonna follow it, I just don't know, as I said here, how we're gonna follow it, or what new policy, for example, OEF.
Right.
They've been historically giving grants to specific teachers in schools, I believe. So will there be a, hey, thank you for your offer, Tiffany will be reviewing it and deciding if that will be accepted or not?
So we're actually working on a process at the request of the board previously about donors choose and how there were maybe some things on donors choose. And so we were going to go with a software called Living Tree, and it turned out it was just too clunky, didn't really fit our purposes. So we have been reviewing for eventual implementation a process, a very, very simple Google form where teachers say, I am requesting a grant, I am requesting a donation, or I am requesting a fundraiser, and that those all go through this little 4 or 5 question form that gets submitted to Cheryl, to me, and to the principal for approval. And we say, yes, this is something that because what's happened before is sometimes we'll submit for one of those 3 things, and then there's ongoing commitment of the district. Like if it's technology, or you request some piece of furniture or some TV or something, and then we have to install that, and we may not know that we have to install that, or we may not have the capacity to install that, and that's not included in the gift. And so it creates some tension if we can't get to that, or if we ask for donations that aren't ultimately supported by the district or in line with kind of the technology use or the software use, or et cetera. So we're trying to make it not onerous on the teachers, but that the teachers will have a bit of a process. So we will have a process that'll actually, I think, meet this requirement.
That all sounds good, but, it may come as a surprise, but I would rather not have a policy than have a confusing policy.
I agree.
Right, although I think it's a matter of law that none of the donations are given to the individual teachers or the individual schools, right? And given that people do want to support their local school, and we don't want them to stop, right? I think it's important that that be clarified up front, so we don't have to get into that later. But I do think that if this goes through, it's going to be incumbent on the superintendent to articulate some sort of a guideline in terms of what factors will go into determining whether or not something cannot be given to whom it's been dedicated, right? I think that dedication, that there's incentive there, right? And no one wants to cut that off.
Right.
But I've also seen circumstances, because I think this is just as much to the benefit of our staff as anybody else, because I've seen people be under the misimpression that this is their project, it's their resources, and sometimes the district does have to reallocate. And so this, I think it makes it clear up front, but I don't think it can stand alone, because again, it's very wide open. And myself, I'd like to see us commit to something very specific in terms of how we would make that decision.
Should we then rethink this and come back to this later once we have a process in place?
I would like to, so we do think this is a bit of a problem that we have to address?
I actually, I don't, and it's our current policy. So I just think the important part of this is the first sentence.
I also want, I mean, notice it's not mandatory, right? It just says donors are encouraged. I don't see that as a policy that says, you know, you are prohibited. It's more a statement of principle that although we appreciate donations and we appreciate the dedications, there are administrators who are deeply enmeshed in the details of the district, and they have a really good read on where our resources need to go, as much as we respect, you know, the dedications. And so I just feel like we need to keep that door open.
So
Well-
what if we just took out the rest? It just said all gifts, grants, and bequests shall become district property.
Yeah, I think Jane was the one who said, I'm pretty confident that would be just this statement of the law. I don't know. I feel like this is a bit of a touchy subject, because I just would hate to do things that potentially alienate. We actually, you know, have a lot of donations that go into this district that we actually really rely on. So I'm not sure what we're fixing here.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I don't recall there ever being a problem.
So this is our current policy. We're not making
Right.
any changes to
It
it.
says new wording, NWOK.
Oh, in mine,
Just that one, yes.
you have the same one? Yeah, so mine doesn't,
Yeah, new
Oh,
That's
wording.
what
got
the
it, got it, got it.
wording-
Right.
Okay.
Some word changes from existing policy,
But
but
it's
okay,
basically
right, got
the
it.
same
Right.
policy. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
so are we at a stalemate then?
Well,
I'm not going to vote won't, I mean, it's not like a deal breaker, right? I mean, if it's not a problem, and the concern is that we're going to turn off a lot of people who are doing the right thing right now, that's counterproductive for a policy, it seems to me.
well, I guess my recommendation would be to leave it out, rethink it, and if we think we need it, to come back and talk
More
about it.
artfully stated if necessary.
Yeah. Is anyone opposed to that?
Kevin, do you have language that you're proposing? Or you
I
just
would
want
leave it
stricken
out. I mean, I guess
altogether?
if I look at the current policy, you know, I think these opportunities are great, because we go through policies sometimes and talk about policies that are actually already in existence, but maybe with a slight wording change, and we realize, okay, that's maybe something we should think about more.
Right.
I don't know, you know, if that's essentially just new wording on the same old policy, then I guess the question is, how do we go forward, either doing something different or really trying not to do something different because we think the way things are going are good. This is first reading, right?
Right.
So,
So I'm going
I
to
guess-
suggest we just pull out 14 through 18 for now, so we can move forward, pull them
The
out.
whole policy versus just that paragraph.
Isn't that what you were suggesting, Thane?
Well, that's,
Just
that's
for
my
now-
initial.
For now, I mean,
that's my-
to revisit another time, rather than this reading.
Sure, and then let's revisit it. That sounds fine. Okay. Anything before 31? Or 32? Anything
Yeah, I
before
have 32 also. I have concerns because it talks about collective bargaining agreements, right? The following optional policy is subject to collective bargaining agreements. I'd rather just not have it and use our collective bargaining agreements as our guide.
Sorry, I completely, where are
32.
you?
Page
32.
Oh,
In
The very
regards to
first box,
transfers.
yeah.
And again, as a reminder, this is an optional policy.
So it would make sense to stick with what we've already negotiated.
So we won't include this new one.
Yeah, I think we stick with the collective bargaining agreement and we don't have a separate policy. Uh,
Good to me.
34,
You're the expert on this.
Yeah, no, honestly, I didn't know what this was for, so, like,
Yeah.
clearly this district knows how to negotiate both sides.
so 34 is also optional. I'm just pointing out the optional policies as we're going through here.
Well, I have on page 35, the third paragraph, I have some concerns. School health services shall be provided, and I don't know that we actually have a healthcare professional always on site, or I'm not really sure what it's calling for. I mean, it says may employ or contract with healthcare professionals, but are our health services supervised by a licensed healthcare professional? I don't.
If we're going to keep the section, I would change that to may. I'm always a big may
Well, the
instead of
second-
shall guy.
Yeah, except the second paragraph says, I mean, second sentence says may. It's just,
I mean, the
may,
way I'm
may
reading
doesn't
that
really
is
make
that
sense.
if you're gonna provide medical services, people have to be licensed appropriately, and they can either be employees or contractors, however you need to get them, right? Because we may not have enough work for a full-time school nurse at each of our sites. And so, I mean, I'm not reading this as you can have, like, you could have nothing, right? Like,
Right, well, and I guess reading this in particular, it sounds like if we have them, they will be under the supervision of a licensed healthcare professional, which makes perfect sense. I don't think we should provide healthcare services. I mean, I don't think amateurs should provide healthcare
I agree.
services.
So you're reading it as this isn't saying professional healthcare services at each site, it's just when they're provided, they'll be provided under the supervision of a licensed healthcare.
right, that's how I'm reading it.
Okay,
yeah.
that's, I'm fine with that, obviously, I think.
Although if a teacher puts a Band-Aid on, I'm okay with that too.
Proper training.
But that's under the supervision, right, so, all right. Let's see. I
Something-
guess the next optional policy is 41, which is another school health.
Sorry,
Did you have more?
on page 36, there's a new paragraph in it, and I'm not clear what it entails, that's saying that to encourage access to student health care services, that we're gonna have outreach strategies, et cetera, et cetera. And this is new language, and it's work, right? I'm sorry, page 36.
Right.
So I wanted to ask the superintendent, is this something that we're actually already doing? Is this more? If it's more, how much more?
It is more. We just did it for the first time, though. We actually did a Facebook and a Parent Square promotion of our optional insurance for students. And so, but we just did it because it was the right thing to do, not because it was a board policy.
So is
So
this sustainable?
I-
Now this says.
I would be
it's
okay with this not
mandatory.
being in there.
Okay, all right.
I'm happy to remove it. Although, just, I do recall, even when our kids were in school, we would get notices about the insurance
Beginning
options.
of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do that. And then they're actually quite good, and so we have been doing some more promoting of them because they're low cost, affordable, and good for kids, so
Right. So do we leave it or take it out?
I'm okay with taking it out.
I'm fine.
Taking
Leaving
it
it,
out?
leaving it.
Leaving it?
I'm comfortable with it as long as it's, doable.
Feasible.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm okay with that. I was okay with removing the whole section, too. All right. The next section I'd be okay with removing starts on 41.
It's really prescriptive, no pun intended.
Right.
Um,
But it's May, so, yeah.
I'm fine as it is.
We don't currently do, on page 42, the one about fluoride. I don't believe that we definitely, like, we may notify, but it says we shall notify.
I think this is the kind of thing where you either leave it in or take it out. I don't think a may notify is of any use at all.
Do we still do the dental checkups once a year? Just to
Cheryl and I have been
provide-
talking about that, but I don't believe that we
No
do.
dental checkup,
'Cause we used to
vision
do
and
Vision,
hearing
my kids.
at certain
Vision
grade
and
levels.
hearing, okay.
But we do, when you enroll in kindergarten, you have to have an oral health,
Mm.
you have to have
Evaluation.
proof from a doctor that you went to a dentist and had a checkup.
Yeah, I think we should remove that piece unless Thane wants to remove the whole thing. I don't believe that we want to get into the medical profession with fluoride and
Yeah.
there are issues. with
Anybody
that.
feel strongly about keeping that paragraph? Okay,
No.
moving on. Anything else in that section?
All this talk about, billing through Medicare, is that something we're already doing? Because if it's not, I know that can be a lot of work.
Right. If that were not in there, that would also be okay.
So at that point, do we
That's
want
not
to
a
pull
may.
the whole thing?
I know
Yeah.
at the top of page 45.
It's an optional
It's an optional policy.
policy.
Yeah, we have a lot of ongoing through, at the county, we have a lot of issues with Medi-Cal reimbursements,
yeah.
and so.
Should we, anybody feel strongly about keeping the Medi-Cal billing in there?
And again, if it's ancillary revenue, I don't want to say we would never do it, but to force us into doing something that, where the risk, where the reward is,
Well, we can do it without the policy.
yeah, absolutely.
This would include, if it remains shall, it includes MAW programs.
Right, and MA's
Includes what?
particularly, MA, or, I don't know what MA stands for. I don't remember. Kathy, do you remember what MA stands for?
Medicare administrative.
There it is.
Activities.
Yes. Which is also problematic.
That's, looks like a lot of work. So, from Medi-Cal billing on 43 to the bottom of 45, should we remove that?
Yes, I'm in agreement.
Okay, anybody opposed to removing
Well,
that?
at that point, is there anything that people feel strongly about keeping in there?
Yeah,
Or do we wanna
anything
pull the
anybody
whole
wants to keep.
Policy.
I'm fine
mean,
removing the
we
whole policy.
do-
Special ed does participate in programs, but it doesn't, that can still happen
That
even
can
if we
still
don't have
happen
this
without-
policy.
Right, and it's
Right.
probably in our special ed policies.
So removing 41 through 45.
I would be okay with that.
Me too.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm good with that, too.
I care. I care deeply, Kevin. All right, my next comment is 49.
I actually have a question on 47.
Okay.
Oh, never mind, except when otherwise permitted by law. Because I'm saying sometimes we do suspend based on some social media activity, which is not happening on school grounds, but I assume if there's danger, and that's the permitted by law.
Okay, this,
I'm
Yeah.
on page 49. Is that where you are?
yeah,
Okay.
I think the new law supersedes this anyway. But I don't know what the exact
You
requirements
mean
are.
the law on the defiance?
Yeah,
That's in here. On page 48, option 2.
Right.
right.
I believe that's in
Wait, 49, 48.
48, the new, no student may be suspended for willful defiance.
It's now going to be K through 5.
Okay.
So, yeah, I guess the question is, are we going to adopt the policy for all students or just K-5?
We just accepted something, what was it, last week, right? About
I just gave you superintendent's report about it, I believe.
Yeah.
So you can either say no student in grades K-5, which is the current law that was just signed, or no student altogether. This is where I was telling you that San Francisco, LA Unified, San Diego have all chosen option 2.
Any thoughts? I think my preference would be option 1 with it's K through, the new law is K through 8, right?
Right, K through 5, and then there's a trial period for 6th through 8th grade. That's 5 years.
Right, but,
So it's K-8 right now,
Effectively,
yes, right.
yeah.
So suspension is defined as being put out of the academic environment?
Well, there can be
Alternate academic
on-campus,
assignment or?
on-campus suspensions, right?
So no, an in-school suspension counts,
Right.
but you can give students a program, and then that would not be considered a suspension. So for example, one of the things that we're considering is when a student gets caught vaping, we have this 4-hour module that they can watch. It's an informational module. And so they wouldn't, even though they'd be out of their classroom, they'd be in a program, and so they would not be suspended.
Okay. that
But if
makes
we
sense.
just put them in a classroom behind the football field for in-school suspension, that counts as suspension, whether they're there or at home.
Right.
So what are the thoughts on this?
I'd have to say, it's really, I put it in the hands of the teachers and administration. It's not my place to say whether a child is, I mean, if they're that disruptive and the teacher and the principal feel that they need to be suspended, then,
Right, that's kind of why I like option one, because it specifically addresses willful defiance, which is the new law. And it doesn't get into all the details.
I tend to like the more limited application myself for the same reasons. I think, our administration has demonstrated time and time again that they're not vindictive or out to get kids. And as I understand it, the purpose here is it's counterproductive to take kids who have trouble learning out of the learning environment as a punishment, right? So I get that. But I think we have to trust our folks. And so I would support to the legal minimum and no farther. So what is that, K-5?
K-8,
K-8?
with the,
Or we could
With
put
a
that
modification.
language in
Yeah.
K-5 with a 5-year.
with a pilot for 6 through 8, right? I can bring that back for the second reading.
Okay. Let's see, my next comment is 61. Anybody before that?
no, I have one on that page also. It's optional, I'd rather
Yeah,
just
again,
get rid of it.
just a note.
Again, it's, to me, it's too, it's not my place to be deciding whether a teacher can suspend a student from the class. So I'd rather not have it in the policy and have our administrative, our leadership and our teachers work through that without our hand.
I absolutely agree.
Anyone opposed to not having it?
The only thing, I actually agree in concept. What I do find attractive about this is that I think it's really important that penalties and what gets you those penalties be explicitly laid out for kids way before they go into it, right, in terms of transparency and all of that. So if it's not by policy, somewhere else. Policy is a lot of time and trouble to
Do we
tweak.
have these in
Right.
the school handbooks? It seems like we should.
We have the more specific, outlining of rules that would get you into trouble, so
Yeah.
to speak, so.
I'd kind of
Like a
rather keep
kid-friendly
those in the
language.
handbook.
Yeah,
And-
because this is a lot of trouble to make responsive,
Right.
and the handbook can be responsive immediately.
Yeah.
And if your goal is having students know where they stand, they're not reading the board policies.
Oh,
Really?
come
They're
on.
not?
I'm just not thinking they are.
I just have a hard time.
So, okay, so we're talking about taking out the suspension from class by teacher stuff?
Yes.
Just as a board policy.
But we have similar policies already, I assume, right? I mean, this whole thing confuses me a little because as I understand it, the new law is that that a district can't suspend a kid for willful defiance, but a teacher still can.
So the teacher part of it is really applied more in secondary schools where you have 6 periods and you might have a classroom teacher like 3rd period and they send the student out and then they go maybe sit in the principal's office for that class period and they've been suspended from their class, but they're not really suspended from school because they can go to their other 5 classes. So when a teacher suspends a kid from their class for 1 period, that does not count as a suspension or an in-school suspension, like in the eyes of the dashboard. They'd have to be completely suspended for the whole day, either into in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension to have it count. So that's where a teacher has some ability to suspend a kid where it's not considered a suspension because it's not the whole day.
Yeah, suspension isn't actually even the right word.
It really isn't.
For it.
But,
Yeah.
but I think we're talking by each other, because what I'm saying is, as I read the law, a teacher, like a third grade teacher, could suspend a kid for willful defiance and say, you are suspended, and go and have that kid leave that classroom and go home and be suspended for the next day as well. That's what I understand the law to say.
So if you read it, it really was written for secondary, but yes, that means that an elementary teacher does have that same right, but there's like 2 levels. So the teacher can suspend them out of the classroom, but the principal makes the decision to actually suspend them from school. So if they were suspended out of class, they might still get to go to their PE session with a different teacher or go to other teachers' classrooms, even though that teacher in 3rd grade, the general ed teacher, has exercised her right to have the student out of class. The way it's written, it's clearly written for secondary, but of course we have to apply it to elementary as well, even though it doesn't fit as well in the realm of elementary.
Plus, I do think, I mean, I remember when one of my sons was in 4th grade, there was a student just having a particular really hard time in a classroom, and so they just ended up moving him to another classroom, and he ended up being fine in there. So I assume he was suspended from the other class, but he wasn't going home.
Suspended from
Yeah,
school.
from
Right.
school. He just went to,
Yeah.
and not every one of our campuses has that option, but that was possible at the time, so.
Got it. Got it.
So, are you comfortable taking it
I
out,
was
or?
more interested in the underlying issue.
Okay. All right, so we'll take that out. I guess my next one is 66, and these are optional, suspension by the board. We've never, as long as I've been on the board, we've never suspended. We've expelled, but we've never suspended.
Yeah, and there,
I would rather leave that to the school.
Why would it come to the board? I mean, what are possible reasons that it wouldn't be
You
handled at
didn't
the-
agree with us, like, we decided not to suspend a kid for a particular thing, and you didn't
And
agree
we
with it.
decided to overrule you? All right, I don't see that happening.
So, we're in agreement to remove that section? Just page 66?
Sounds like
Suspension
anybody
by the
feels
board.
strongly about keeping that suspension by the board?
I'm still unclear as to how that would actually work in real world. I mean, given, this sounds like an exigency policy, but we don't do anything exigently. I
Right.
mean, I'm not quite sure what this
We're not gonna
means.
wait a month.
You're in agreement then, let's get rid of it.
But yeah, not knowing why it's here, I'm okay.
All right, and then the on-campus suspension section is also optional. It looks like we've had this policy in place, though, so if we want to leave it,
What page?
that's fine.
66.
Same page,
Oh, same.
bottom of 66, going on for the next several pages.
I think it's useful as an option.
Okay.
If we, I mean.
This
whether
is
we use
what
it.
you were talking
Yeah.
about with the vaping modules. This would be an on-campus suspension?
No, on-campus suspensions are like when we designate a room with a random teacher and the student just has to go there and usually do like
Nothing.
study work for the whole day. And there's no programming.
But if we knew that a kid was going to be left home alone for several days, like if a student was going to be home for 5 days with no supervision, if we suspended them, it might be better to have the option for on-campus suspension so that they're not at home potentially causing more problems without supervision.
Yep,
So,
agreed. I'm fine with leaving. Anything
It's gonna be a
before
long night.
78?
Before 78?
Right. And I only mentioned 78 because it's optional. There's the decision to suspend an expulsion order, but I think we've done this before, and I'm okay with leaving it.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
The next, I just write optional on all the pages and then I put paper
Well, I
clips.
actually want to discuss 83 beyond just it being optional.
Okay,
I'm very interested in adding civics and also some more, I guess it's civics, but what is I'm thinking of in, that you and I were talking about, Shelley? I mean, that civics is also just sort of a political institutions class, and they're learning what their rights are and
yeah.
their responsibilities as a voter, and I'm just wondering, yes, we recognize the involvement, we recognize it's important, but it says shall approve. I'm not sure we're there yet, like, are we ready to implement a civics class? And by keeping this in, are we saying, yes, we're adding something? I mean, can we just change the word to,
And does the state have standards and curriculum frameworks for this?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's already embedded in a
Right.
lot of our coursework, like government at the high school level, which we just adopted a book for that, for example. And so, and then all of the curriculum, especially K-8, has it embedded in the social studies and history. So, we didn't get into great detail when we were adopting that curriculum, but the curriculum has it in it.
But if we were to adopt it as a freestanding class, then we would have to have a deep discussion about what else would go.
Yeah.
well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
It seemed like it was sort of focusing on that, but
Right.
that's not, I'm reading it too strongly.
I don't think it applies one class. I mean, I think we
Right.
do a lot of this already through history and social studies.
And it's a current policy,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I did just want to mention, while we're on this, to thank the League of Women Voters for coming on campus for Constitution Day and enrolling
Voter registration.
voter registration, and that was very exciting. We have a civic-minded community.
All right, so are we good with the civic education
Well, I
section?
had a question on 85, about the League of Women Voters coming on campus, and it says, are we forced to do it the 2 full weeks in April and September, or can they do it other times? That's more in line with when the league can do it?
I
Is that
see a lot
who
of
does?
Mays in here.
Okay. So it's,
I have those paragraphs circled here, but there were a lot of Mays, so I thought,
Yeah, and it said county election officials shall be allowed to register students. We certainly have never turned anyone away who wanted to come on campus, so
okay.
we're okay with that.
Can I clarify with you, page 84, Constitution Citizenship Day, should that be a may and not a shall? Shall hold educational program?
I
Second sentence,
always like May.
I would go with some word that is a little more encouraging than just may. But I think it's,
Shall really try hard?
I'm sorry?
I said, shall really try hard?
Where is that? Oh, on 84, no wonder I'm not on.
How about we'll endeavor to?
Brilliant.
I like that.
Yeah.
That works for me.
Endeavor.
Right?
So the district civic education program
It's a
shall
statement of
endeavor
intent.
to provide students. Is that the one?
It's actually
Is that
here.
the
Hold
shall?
educational programs.
Endeavor to hold an educational program
Yep,
for students.
sounds good. Yeah, from my perspective, we can add that language to anywhere it says shall.
Other questions?
Page 92,
I had a question there too.
it's just, do we have a
Yeah.
defibrillator?
Do we have those?
It's
We
requiring
do.
that we, okay.
Actually, we do have defibrillators. We just installed them.
I know.
Let me catch up with
Oh,
you.
I start having a lot. Page 95,
There's that.
95.
yeah. At the bottom, when a school provides only one team in a particular sport for members of one sex, I can think of volleyball. We don't have men's volleyball, do we?
Yeah,
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
Okay.
at Nordoff, we do.
But are there other sports? I mean, I just worry a little bit. I mean, I definitely think we should have opportunities, but I,
Well,
Should be allowed
football,
to try.
we
I'm
have
actually
had
fine with
girls
them
play
trying out,
football.
I guess. I was just worried about volleyball. I was like, does that mean guys get to, but if you say we have a volleyball team for guys,
We
then.
do.
Page 99, the middle paragraph, a middle school or high school football team shall not hold a full contact practice during off-season and shall not conduct more than 2 full contact practices per week. Are we doing that?
No, and I think this is in line with the CIF regulations.
I mean, it says okay, but I thought they were doing full contact at every practice. So I'd like
In
to,
the off-season? Yeah.
off-season and regular season.
Which one are you
2
reading,
full
Jane?
per week during the
In
preseason.
The middle paragraph about football, full contact. A middle school or high school football team shall not hold a full contact practice during the off-season and shall not conduct more than 2 full contact practices per week during the preseason and regular season.
I'm pretty confident that we follow this. I would, even back in my day, preseason, we didn't have any full contact.
No, but it's
But
saying
it's
during
regular
regular
season.
season now.
Well, no, regular season, it's
2
2
days.
per week, which
Yeah.
would be pretty typical.
So this is ed code, so we should be following ed code, and if
Right.
not, but
And usually our, athletic directors get lots of information when they go to CIF meetings, and
Right.
that gets brought back to coaches. I would venture to guess that this is being followed and being discussed, but we can certainly check in, make sure it's
yeah,
happening.
for
And
sure.
then also on that page that we are providing training about heat illness.
Yes, we do.
Yes. Kathy just sent out an email like last week about the. We do.
I had a question on 101, just, is this CIF only? Is it only Nordoff, or is this Matilah also?
About the AEDs. I know we have installed, I believe, 2 at Nordoff, and I think there may be one going into Matilah, but it's not in yet because we don't have the gym yet finished.
Be nice to have one there because
Mhm.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
basketball and
Yeah.
volleyball.
So this requires 2, and at least 1, and we have 2.
We have 2 at Nordoff.
Okay.
We installed them,
And this is at a district level?
yeah,
Oh, at each district school?
Each school, so Matilah,
right.
that's what I'm asking, is it
Yeah, but what
required
about the
Matilah?
elementaries?
Oh,
This is available to coaches, athletic trainers, and
I
so
thought it had
this,
to do with athletes.
yeah,
events.
particular one is about athletes.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that it excludes elementaries, does it?
It says, so this is basically talking about athletic activities.
Right, we shall require at least 1 AED for each district school.
So do we count our elementary PE teachers?
And shall
as-
make, to coaches, athletic trainers, and other athletic events, so, yeah, it is PE, an athletic event. And I don't know if we have them yet at the elementary schools or not, I think we only ordered the 3.
I don't feel like it reads that it applies to elementary because it's so focused on, excuse me, athletic activities and events and coaches
I
and
think we should
trainers.
clarify then that at least 1 for each district school.
And if you read up here, it says, interscholastic athletic programs, so I think that's what it's referring to.
Can we just say then for each district school that offers an interscholastic athletic program?
Yes, sounds good.
I just don't like saying things that aren't
Right.
No, I
accurate,
might.
yeah.
Mhm.
I have something on 105.
Mhm.
Boy, I don't feel like we do this, these placement protocols. I've just heard stories about kids who have been in a lower math class and they want to get into a higher math class and they're not allowed to, and you have to have a parent who's gonna go in and fight for you. And I don't think we have students who, all our students don't have parents who will do that. And I'd like to, I don't know, this says new. I guess I agree with it, but I'm wondering how we spread the word.
So this will be part of our whole relooking at our graduation requirements, at our course placement, so that committee that's coming together that we've talked about, part of the work will be to look at the prerequisites for our classes, for our AP classes, our placement, all of that is part of the work of kind of
But
that.
didn't we say that would be like a 2-year process?
Yes.
So that doesn't really help the kids who
So-
are in
I think one of the
honors 8th grade math right now.
I think the intent here, though, is to make sure kids have access to college and that path, and all of our lower level classes, like lower level math and lower level English, are actually all A to G approved. So it might not feel like we have as much open access to honors or advanced placement, but we're not blocking kids from having a path to get them into the 4-year college. So all of our kids are in A to G coursework when they're in those, what we would refer to as lower level classes.
So when I think of that movie, Searching for Superman, or whatever it was.
Waiting for Superman.
What was it called?
Waiting for
Waiting.
Waiting for Superman, and there was that one girl in particular that they were following, who, if she didn't get there, she was tracked.
Yeah.
At the lower level.
Yeah, so that, I mean, when we look at our students in our core classes, they are not being tracked into a sequence that would not allow them to get to A to G, provided that they pass those courses with a C or better, which is an expectation for A to G.
And if you read the little note above, it's interesting because I think it's mostly looking at having ninth graders repeat algebra, which is a little bit different. But I hear what you're saying, and it's definitely something that we as a district need to look into as part of our value of having an inclusive culture.
Absolutely.
So it's on our radar and something that we would like to do, and this policy provides us with the ability
Right,
to
so
do
Ed
that.
Code mandates that the district's policy include at least one placement checkpoint within the first month of the school year. Does that mean every teacher is giving,
Every student.
A grade check?
Progress reports.
So it's not an extra test, it's just using something they currently do.
but I don't know that it's specifically that teachers are looking about accurate placement and permanent reevaluation of individual. Certainly, it's looking at how is the student doing in this class, but I don't think the teachers are looking at, is this student correctly placed?
We could formalize that probably better. Again, I think the intent for all of this is making sure that we're not leaving students in classes that would cause them to not get into, to have a path toward a college entrance.
Actually,
So-
doesn't go just a little bit beyond that, and I mean, it seems to me that the spirit of this policy is that we let students pursue as rigorous a course of education as they can handle.
Is always the
And
intent.
that there be a process by which they articulate their desire for more if we don't think they're ready, right? And I'm fully in support of that, in concept, right? I think, if kids think that they can take on more, they should be able to say that to us. We should have a process to look at that, make sure that they're not, overcommitting, because they're not the professionals. But to me, that's the gist here, is let them get as rigorous as they want to be realistically.
Yes.
Which
So I'm
is our goal.
actually okay with this.
I think the policy is fine, right, Jane? It's
Yes.
just to make sure that we're doing it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I ever thought about this particularly, but we thought about a lot of things.
So then the next page, 106, is actually requiring the board to annually review student data related to placement in mathematics classes. I'm not sure how that would be helpful.
Well, this policy is mandated,
Right.
but I agree with you. I don't know how we do
Okay.
it.
Well, we just need to take note of that and we decide when we would be doing that. Would we be doing it in June or May or?
Yeah, I
think
guess
this
it would, yeah, go ahead.
I think this discussion can be a discussion that doesn't have to be super specific. When we annually talk about our testing data, we can kind of embed that into the conversation as far as, if we have so many students who are not exceeding the standard in math, does that correlate to, the number of students that are not in classes? But again, I do think the intent here is making sure that we're not leaving kids in remedial classes that limit their ability to get to college. And again, all of ours are considered college prep courses, so.
Yeah. Well, we'll rely on you to make sure this,
But I just want to reiterate, I am also, I love the idea of kids being able to take the most rigorous coursework they can take, and I think that we are champions of that, and I know that because we have classes with 40 kids in them, and we have honors classes in English where it doesn't matter which period you're in, you still can be honors if you want to do the rigor of honors coursework. So I think Nordhoff lives and breathes that concept of wanting kids to be in it. But I do know, I've heard stories of parents not understanding how to advocate for the class that maybe their kid could be in, and so we could get better at formalizing that so parents know better how to get their kids into more rigorous coursework.
We will get better at that.
Yeah, we will.
Well, I was
So
gonna
that's-
say, along the lines of the large classes, I mean, that's really part of this, in a
Yeah.
sense, so, I mean, maybe that's the time we should be talking about when we're staging for the coming year and what we think these classes are gonna look like,
Mm-hmm.
and whether, that's gonna be an effective.
Which is also part of why having our new Edgenuity product can allow us to offer some of those advanced options for kids, even if we don't have the teacher to have them in a full class. So that product allows us, and that policy that you passed allows us to have some flexibility for kids to allow them to advance even when in the past we wouldn't have, because we wouldn't have had a full class.
Because that's actually on 109, so it's offering teachers the ability to say, well, they haven't been doing well, but I think they could be doing well, or, and that might be, so instead of having 45 students in a class, maybe we can add 8 students and then have 2 sections or something. So, I mean, I love these policies. I'm saying, look, they're mandated. This is kind of new for us. It says new, and I think I like that focus, and I want to encourage that. And make us aware, and make our administrators aware and our teachers aware of these new requirements.
Right, any other comments on the policies?
114?
We see- I know, you're doing a
I
great
don't
job.
think it's just that I get tired once I get to page 100.
A credentialed teacher who is first assigned a TK class after July 1 shall have at least 24 units of early childhood education. I assume that's not counting a combo class, because I don't know that all are.
So it's only if they have TK students in that combo class. There's a special TK authorization that teachers need to get.
So that's next August. We're prepared.
We have several teachers who've gone through the training, and then, I didn't read this closely, but there are teachers that could be grandfathered in at this point.
Because
if
they
they
started
taught
before the
TK.
15th, or before 2015.
Right.
I believe it had to do something with the number of years they taught TK. Do you remember that, Angeli?
Yeah, it's, your grandfather if you have taught TK in the past.
Right.
Right.
Just at all in the past?
I believe it's
I think something like that, yeah.
But I think we do have some new this year or last year, we had some new teachers who were in TK. I just want to make
Yes.
sure we're.
Yes, and they have
following the rules.
authorization.
Yeah.
You're correct, they have authorization.
Okay.
We have like 4 teachers that have authorization in TK. It was done through Ventura County Office of Education.
Yeah.
They had offered a program.
They've been gearing up for this around the
Yes.
county for the last couple of years.
118, you have something before that?
Wow,
Um,
that's great.
The bottom paragraph, the superintendent shall systematically review the district CTE courses. I know we were doing that with math and.
If only you had any
Carnine's
expertise.
class or
I
what?
know,
I was gonna say,
I
we
think
do
what-
do this.
I think what happened here is when I got to CTE, I just thought, oh, Tiffany can
Tiffany
handle
will
it.
I did actually talk to Mr. Walker about this section in depth, so,
I have lots of, do we do this?
Yeah.
yeah.
Is this happening?
There's a lot of optionals in here that I was hoping Thane would pick up, but we should have put these like earlier in the.
Right. No, it's
So new,
true. When I
so
got to
just
the
the same thing.
CTE, I just said, so what in here do you think would be better left unsaid?
So the bottom, the superintendent shall explore available funding sources that may, I mean, we do that, but
Right.
is that a
I'm
shall,
okay
is that a may?
taking that out, because I
Um,
know you'll do it anyway.
Right. The next one, the board shall adopt district standards for CTE, which meet or exceed. We've done that, but, the course curriculum shall be aligned with district adopted standards. So I don't know in the past here if you've adopted those formally CTE standards. My guess is you probably haven't.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, they're actually always outdated, which is hard in CTE, because they're, they put them out 10 years ago, and so if you're in computer science, you're they're irrelevant, pretty much.
Well, that's
And
what I mean,
so-
I like these, all these new ones on 118 and 119, but they do all say shall.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure we're capable of doing that.
Right.
And,
Most of these, yeah.
you know, do we
It
want to
doesn't
say,
specifically say
shall
optional.
attempt, shall, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
It's-
think
I
this
was
is
Shall
just-
optional.
develop partnerships with local businesses and industries.
I know we're talking about doing that, but again,
The
this
other-
is demanding, it's, I know.
The other thing is that these are, if you read in the very beginning, most of these are aligned to Perkins funds. We actually don't take Perkins funds, and so we don't have to do all of this because we don't take Perkins funds. And my understanding is that we had applied for, Perkins is the federal CTE funding that's highly, highly restrictive. And my understanding is in the past, we had Perkins funding, but it was so restrictive that we didn't actually spend it because it was too difficult and it requires almost a full-time person to report on. So, but we're in the process of looking at our whole CTE program. So if you want to bring this back in the second reading after, because there's some new CTE stuff that's coming out right now, that we'll be bringing to you anyway. So if you want to review this in conjunction with that.
Sure, and I'm happy for you to recommend sections you'd prefer to remove.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is just which is, it's not clear to me that any of this is optional.
Right.
Like, for example, when it says that every 3 years, the board shall compare the district's curriculum with the model standards, I assume that's actually just something we have to do.
I do think it's related to if you're taking Perkins funding, but it doesn't say this, but John Walker and I did talk about that,
It might be in the Ed Code 52376, but I didn't go to the Ed Code.
yeah.
Yeah, half of this I actually have no problem with, right? That, you know, where it directs that we review the needs of a CTE program and that we review our progress and that superintendent report on all of that stuff. I think it's a really, really important 21st century component to our
Right.
curriculum. When I get to page 119, I start to get a little less comfortable because these are all strategies, but each one is couched as a shall, right?
Right.
You shall reach out, you shall do this, you shall, I don't know that you can do all of these things all at once. I know some of these things we are doing. I know Tiffany spearheaded it throughout the district, right, with the career pathways thing. And we've talked about dual enrollment. All those things are great, but this just says we're going to do everything all at once. And to me, that's a recipe for doing everything badly.
Sounds like shall endeavor too would be really good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to step away from any of these things because they're all valuable things to do, but to just say, hit them now, I think that's too much.
So if I can review this and bring this,
Yeah.
this section was finished, but if you're open to it, I will review
So I
it.
think you're right, though. I'm just looking at the one of the Ed Code sections, and it says the governing board of any school district that maintains a high school may expend supplemental funding a portion pursuant to section 54761. Sounds like that's
Yeah,
that funding you're referring to.
Right, Perkins.
And then if so, then,
right. And you can see it's kind of in here a little bit, where it references Perkins a few times throughout, but it's not clear which are specific to Perkins and which aren't, but.
So that includes on 131, the bottom, about the regional occupational, so.
Yes.
we'll do all that.
Yeah, there is actually no such thing as a regional occupation
Right.
center anymore, or program, or Ed Code
know, that's why I was
governing that,
like,
so
It says optional, let's.
Yeah.
Pull
it
it out.
doesn't exist.
I think that was it.
That was it.
I mean, the Ed Code doesn't
So
exist.
I think I learned that I don't need to read them anymore, and you cover everything that I had marked.
Jane does a good job. As do we all. All right, thank you very much.